Okay, let's dive in. We're looking at frustration today, specifically through this really interesting source you sent over. And the idea isn't just, venting about being frustrated. It's more about what this particular source thinks frustration is.
Right, what it might be trying to tell you, maybe.
Exactly. What's the message underneath it all?
And right off the bat, it kind of turns things upside down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Compared to how we usually think about it.
Yeah. How so?
Well, it argues frustration isn't just annoyance or, a simple sign you messed up or failed.
Okay.
It calls it something much deeper, a fracture.
Yeah.
Even uses the word dissonance.
Dissonance, like an inner clash, something not lining up inside.
Precisely. It frames it as this tension, this gap between who you sort of deeply long to become, your potential,
Right.
and the reality of, well, your current inner state, your inner condition, as this source puts it.
So it's where the image you hold of yourself, maybe who you think you should be.
Yeah, that should be part is key.
It bumps up against who you actually are right now.
Exactly. It's happening inside, not just as an external obstacle.
Okay, that's a big shift already. And the source is really emphatic that this fracture, it isn't failure.
Absolutely. It explicitly states frustration is not failure. It calls it the breaking open of illusion.
The breaking open of illusion. Wow.
Yeah. It's like the moment that perfect picture, the idealized version of yourself you might have been clinging to.
The one that doesn't really exist.
Probably not perfectly, no. That picture starts to show cracks. It starts to break apart.
Okay, so when that illusion, that image starts to crack, what's actually revealed, what's underneath?
According to the source, what emerges is, and I'm quoting here, breath, trembling, limitation, and life.
Life, including the messy bits.
Yes. And it argues that the real inner work, the authentic stuff, it actually begins in that rupture.
Not before.
Not in the same way it suggests. That rupture forces you to pause, to stop pushing against something so hard, and just look within. Not necessarily to fix it straight away or judge it, but just to witness what's actually there.
Witnessing instead of fighting it. That's a radically different approach for most of us, I think.
It really is.
Now, this source gives us a framework, almost like a formula, to understand this internal dynamic. It calls it a living equation.
Right. Frustration, blocked, shame, plus unrefined desire.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because those words, shame and desire, can mean a lot of different things. How does the source define them here?
Yeah, the definitions are crucial. Shame here isn't about feeling morally bad or guilty.
Not like, I did something wrong.
No, it's described more as a silent freeze within us. It's like energy that got stopped in its tracks, halted by some kind of internalized judgment.
Judgment, like feeling I'm not good enough.
Exactly, that kind of thing. A deep, quiet belief, maybe. I am not enough. Doesn't always shout. The source says it often whispers impossibilities, makes things feel inherently undoable.
A silent freeze? That resonates. It feels different than just anger or guilt and desire. That one often gets painted as, ego-driven, wanting, craving.
True, but again, the source defines it differently here. It's not egoic craving. It's the soul's movement toward form, toward meaning, toward revelation.
The soul's movement.
Think of it as an inner fire seeking to become visible. Your essential impulse to grow, express, create, move forward.
Got it. So frustration, according to this equation, isn't just bad desire. It's actually this positive life force, this inner fire, running into that internal freeze, that blocked shame.
Precisely. The source argues frustration is born when that natural desire gets trapped within shame.
Trapped.
Yeah, and that dynamic creates pressure. Intense pressure sometimes.
And that's where the transformation happens, in the pressure cooker.
That's what the source suggests. Right there, in that pressure where desire meets the freeze. That's where the seeds of transformation are held.
Wow. Okay. Seeds of transformation living in the pressure. That really flips the script on just wanting frustration to go away.
It does. It reframes it completely.
And where do we often feel that pressure most? I mean, usually it's when we hit a limit, right?
Often, yes. And the source has a really interesting take on limits, too. It doesn't see them as the enemy.
No.
Not at all. In fact, it calls limits the first true teachers.
The first true teachers. Okay. How so?
Well, the source suggests that a lot of our frustration isn't necessarily about hitting a real fundamental incapacity. It's often about bumping up against a false image of strength or capability we've adopted.
Something we think we should be able to do, but maybe wasn't really ours to begin with.
Exactly, an internalized expectation that doesn't match our authentic nature or current capacity.
So the limit shows up, we feel frustrated, and the limit's message is...
The source puts it quite bluntly. This is where you stop pretending.
Stop pretending! Ouch! But also freeing.
Potentially, yes. Because in that moment, the source argues, a whole new relationship with yourself can open up. How to reject.
Instead of rejecting where you are, judging the limit, it becomes about measurement.
Measurement, like seeing clearly.
Seeing your actual shape, your real capacity right now, without the shoulds. It shifts the feeling from one of defeat, maybe, to one of discovering authenticity.
That sounds gentler somehow, less about fighting yourself.
It is.
Yeah.
And it changes the core question you're asking.
How does the question change?
It moves away from that striving, maybe shame-fueled question. Why can't I be more? Why aren't I better?
Yeah, that one's familiar.
And it shifts towards something more grounded, more resonant, what is truly mine to become, what fits my actual nature.
Okay. So the limit isn't a dead end.
No. The source says it's the beginning of real orientation. It actually helps point you towards your path, not some idealized one.
This reframing is powerful.
Yeah.
Seeing frustration connected to limits in our inner state leads the source to call it an evolutionary signal.
Right. It's not a judgment, not a final verdict on you. It's just information, data.
And what's the signal saying? Essentially, you are misaligned with the truth of what is, either internally or maybe in how you're trying to engage with the world.
Misaligned. Okay. Now, the source makes a really important distinction here about where the suffering and frustration comes from. It's not desire itself that's the problem.
Correct. The suffering, it argues, comes from desiring from a false center.
And it identifies that false center as the ego.
Yes. When desire comes from that egoic place, needing validation, proving something, maybe based on those shoulds, frustration tends to fragment you. It scatters your energy, makes you feel pulled apart.
But if desire comes from somewhere else?
If it comes from a place of presence, from being centered in your actual self, the source says frustration can refine you.
Refine you. How?
It helps clarify what's truly important, what's really yours to pursue. The goal isn't to kill desire, but to mature it.
Mature it. Okay.
To shift it away from demanding things, projecting needs onto the world, and move it towards expressing yourself authentically, creating from a place of presence.
So in that sense, frustration becomes, well, the source says, not an obstacle to growth, but the very terrain where growth begins.
Exactly. It's the ground itself, not just a rock in the path.
Okay, if frustration is this fertile ground, this signal, where does the source say we should begin working with it, not just against it? It mentions silence earlier.
Yes, that's key. The source calls the first act of healing something that begins in silence, not in more effort, not in beating yourself up with shame.
Just silence.
Quiet presence. And in that space, it suggests asking a really crucial, honest question.
Which is?
What are my actual capacities right now, without comparison?
Oof. Without comparison, that's the hard part.
It really is. And this connects to another sharp point the source makes. Frustration betrays us because we have betrayed ourselves first.
How have we betrayed ourselves?
By bowing to the idol of an idealized self. By prioritizing that perfect, unrealistic image over our actual breathing reality.
That image we taste, it's not really alive.
Right. And so true healing, the source suggests, starts right when that idealized image cracks.
When it breaks.
When it breaks. And what steps forward then isn't some polished, perfected, best version of you.
No.
No. It's the real one. The one that exists right now, limitations and all.
So it's not about resignation, like giving up.
The source frames it not as resignation, but as a return.
A return.
To what?
To a self that isn't performing anymore, isn't trying so hard to impress or meet external standards. A self that's just seeking to be.
Seeking to be. That sounds incredibly liberating, but maybe also confusing. How do you navigate that shift?
It definitely can be confusing. The source acknowledges that it calls frustration a knot of many voices.
A knot of many voices. Like what?
All tangled up in there are things like past failures, cultural pressures about success, maybe some hidden grief you haven't processed, and mixed in with all that, that genuine sacred longing we talked about earlier.
Wow. Okay, so it's complex. How do you untangle a knot like that? Wow. Does the source say, like, analyze every single thread? Not exactly analysis in that way. It suggests something different. Returning to the center, to that place of quiet presence again.
Okay.
And asking some specific, clarifying questions from that centered place.
What kind of questions?
The source lists three main ones. First, what did I desire to become, and where did it fail? Or where did it feel like it failed?
Okay. Acknowledging the desire and the break.
Second, when did I confuse failure with worthlessness? When did I start tying my identity to that perceived failure?
That's a deep one.
And third, what is still alive in me now if I stop comparing? What energy, what impulse is still present beneath the layers of frustration and shame?
Those are powerful questions.
And crucially, the source stresses these are not questions to solve like math problems.
Right.
They're questions to sit with until clarity rises like water from stillness. The act of sitting with them honestly is the process.
Just holding the questions in that silent space. Okay.
Now, another major contributor to this whole frustration knot, according to the document, is what it terms the secret contract we make with the world.
A secret contract. What is it?
It's that unspoken, often unconscious deal. If I strive hard enough, if I achieve enough, if I contort myself enough, you, the world, will finally validate me. You'll tell me I'm okay.
Ah, the hunger for external approval.
Exactly. And the source calls this hunger a trap. A big one.
Why a trap?
Because true liberation, it suggests, doesn't come when the world finally gives you the stamp of approval you crave.
No. When does it come?
It comes when you stop asking to be seen, stop needing that external validation so badly, and instead make the choice to see ourselves.
See ourselves? But how? Does it mean just puffing ourselves up?
No, not with vanity or arrogance, the source clarifies, but with fidelity.
Fidelity, loyalty.
Loyalty, yes. Loyalty to your own inner truth, your own experience, your own current reality. It's about stepping into what the source calls sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Like being your own authority.
In a way, yes. Operating from that inner alignment. And from that place, you create, you act, you express. The source says not to be approved, but to be aligned.
Alignment over approval. That feels like a core theme here.
It really is.
And this connects directly to another key distinction the source makes.
Yeah.
The difference between true will and false will.
Yes, this is fundamental to understanding how we move forward from frustration.
Okay, so what's false will according to the source?
False will is the kind of will that it pushes, it demands, it tries to overcome obstacles purely through force. It wants to impose its shape onto reality.
Like sheer effort and control, probably fueled by that need for approval or that idealized self.
Often, yes. It's tense, forceful, maybe even aggressive in its energy.
Okay. And true will, how is that different?
True will, the source says beautifully, does not force, it flows.
It flows.
It arises not from needing to conquer something, but from inner congruence, from clarity, from being aligned with your authentic self. It doesn't come from that tight, compressed feeling of frustration.
So it's less effortful.
It might still involve effort, but the quality is different. The source uses a striking metaphor. True will is not a sword, but a flame.
Not a sword, but a flame. Meaning?
A sword tries to cut through, to break things. A flame, it illuminates paths. It shows the way forward that's already, in a sense, available when you're aligned.
Wow. Illuminates paths. And the source suggests that when you're operating from this true will, frustration actually stops.
It ceases, yes. Not necessarily because all external challenges disappear overnight.
Right.
But because your inner world stops being in constant collision with the external world. That internal battle quiets down.
The source puts it very simply, doesn't it? There is no more fight. There is only form.
Exactly. Your aligned intention just naturally flows into action, into form, without that feeling of intense struggle against yourself or the world.
That feeling of struggle, that fight, it often feels linked to time, doesn't it? Like we're constantly running behind, not achieving things fast enough.
Oh, definitely. And the source addresses this directly. It says frustration gets amplified because we're always measuring ourselves against clocks that are not ours.
External timelines, societal expectations, comparing our pace to others.
All of that. The tyranny of the external clock. And the source offers this beautiful counterpoint. The soul has no stopwatch.
The soul has no stopwatch. I like that.
Its rhythm, it says, is different. It's seasonal, lunar, and patient. It has its own timing.
So trying to find and honor your own pace that isn't laziness, which is often the fear.
The source explicitly says it's not laziness, it is alignment. It's actually an act of self-respect.
How so?
It's like making a declaration, maybe just internally. My timing is sacred, even if it is unseen by the world's metrics.
My timing is sacred.
True movement, the source suggests, the kind that comes from true will, isn't rushed. It's loyal.
Yeah.
loyal to that inner rhythm. And that loyalty, it says, is one of the highest forms of self-respect.
Respecting your own natural timing. Okay, now to help put all these ideas into practice, the source actually offers an exercise, right? It mentions that sometimes thinking alone can't solve it.
Yes, it says, sometimes thought cannot untie that not only presence can.
Presence again?
Mm-hmm. And it offers what it calls 4 questions of return.
Mm-hmm.
A quiet exercise designed to foster that presence and bring clarity.
These sound similar to the clarification questions, but maybe more focused on practice.
They are. Let me list them. 1,
Mhm.
what did I long to become and where did that longing break? Similar to before, but maybe feeling into it more.
Okay.
2, when did I begin to tie that break to my identity? Again, digging into that link between failure and worthlessness.
Right.
3, what part of me is still alive beneath the shame? Connecting with that resilient life force.
Okay, finding the spark.
And 4, what can I do now? Not to prove, but to honor. What small action can I take that honors what's alive in me without needing it to be some grand achievement?
Not to prove, but to honor. That's a key shift.
It really is. And the source adds this encouragement. You do not need the answer immediately, but ask with sincerity, and the knot will begin to unravel.
Sincerity seems to be the active ingredient.
Yes, asking from that centered place.
This idea of the knot unraveling brings us to the concept of transmutation that the source talks about towards the end.
Right. Frustration is this knot, remember, tangled with all those voices. But the source insists it's not a meaningless knot. It actually gathers things up.
Gathers what?
Everything that was maybe denied or judged too harshly or rushed past within you, it holds that energy.
So how do you transmute it? You don't just cut the knot.
No, the approach suggested is the opposite of force. It's to stop pulling at the threads, stop fighting it, to simply sit with the knot, with that feeling of frustration.
Just be with it, in presence.
Yes. And the source claims that when you do this, the knot itself stops being just pain and starts to become a source of listening. You start to hear what's held within it.
And that listening,
Yeah.
that's what transforms it.
That listening becomes transformation, is how the source puts it. The path forward doesn't open up because you forced it, but because of fidelity.
Fidelity again. Loyalty to what's real within you.
Exactly. Loyalty to your actual experience moment by moment.
So in this view, frustration isn't something you conquer or defeat.
No, it's transmuted.
Yeah.
It changes form. Its energy is repurposed.
And becomes...
It becomes the riverbed through which new life begins to flow. The very energy that was stuck and causing pain is released and becomes the current carrying you forward.
From knot to flow, that's quite a journey.
It really maps out a whole internal process.
So just to kind of bring this all together, this source takes us on a profound exploration of frustration. It shifts our view completely, doesn't it?
Absolutely. From seeing it as just a problem, an annoyance, something signaling failure,
To seeing it as an invitation, as a signal pointing towards misalignment, even as a path towards authenticity.
and towards discovering what true will actually feels like, operating from that place of inner congruence.
The core message that really seems to stand out from the source's conclusion is that line.
Where you failed, you may not have erred. You may have forgotten who you truly are.
Right. It reframes failure not as a mistake in action necessarily, but as maybe a mistake in identity, forgetting your true nature.
It's an invitation to remember, to return.
To return to that real self, to, shed the borrowed images, the shoulds,
Stop the performance for external validation.
and start actually expressing the truth of who you are right now in this moment.
And the promise, or the suggestion from the source, is that from that place of authentic being,
Yeah.
isn't this grinding effort or constant battle anymore? It becomes emergence. It becomes birth.
Something that flows out of you naturally rather than something you have to wrestle into existence.
Exactly.
So maybe the thought to leave everyone with, drawing from all this, is to consider, what if you approached your own frustration differently? What if, instead of immediately trying to eliminate it or push through it, you actually treated it as, well, as this source suggests, as something to listen to?
Something to learn from, perhaps.
Yeah, something to sit with, even. How might that shift how you relate to your desires, your limits, your whole sense of growth?
What if that feeling isn't telling you to stop completely, but just prompting you to listen differently, to find a different orientation?
A perspective that could really change things.
It certainly offers a deep alternative.
Thank you for bringing this source material for this deep dive. It's given us a lot to think about.